как уже сказали, говорить буду сегодня про форматы описания.
Okay, colleagues, I'll talk about the description of formats. And I don't think this slide should take long. My name is Nikolay. I'm head of research and analytics at Vision. I'm responsible for VM and CM expertise. So why we are talking about the formats for describing vulnerabilities? We have many new products, and every vendor tries to come up with something of his or her own. And when we see vulnerabilities published, we see some strange formats, DXT, like mailings, and so on and so forth. To solve this problem, we'll talk about some formats, OVAL, and so on. So, okay, open vulnerability and assessment language. So what do we know about this format? It emerged early in 2000. It was developed by Mitra, and open means that it's open, anyone can use it. So this is an XML and machine readable, and it is still being used quite actively. By whom? And we'll talk about this looking at the next slide. Most Linux installation packages and our international guys, they use this format to talk about their vulnerabilities and how they cope with them. What makes this format good? Many large vendors like Cisco, Microsoft, and so took part in developing specifications, and this helps describe vulnerabilities. And they used to also describe their vulnerabilities and publish them in this format. Where can we see them? Well, I mean, visually. Until 2016, we had a portal from Positive Technologies with a visual description of the vulnerabilities in this format. We can use the Internet Archive to have a look at this. You can follow this QR. And one more Russian language repository is the Altex soft base. They develop the red check, and there you can have a look at these vulnerabilities. And here is a brief description of OVAL. Well, you can split it all into two types of objects, the core one and the supporting one. And if you look at this, you can see that most of the structures are there to run assessments. What are the pluses of OVAL? It's machine readable, and it can automate our activities. Many vendors publish this information, and we can use OVAL. And so we have some logical support to check this. So the vendor provides this to us, and this makes it easier for us to automate our process. Okay, what is it what we don't like in the format? Well, number one, it's XML. Well, okay, XML is machine readable, but we want something more straightforward. And for instance, Red Hat publishing vulnerabilities in this format says late in 2020. So in 2024, they will replace it with the new format. Frankly speaking, the standard is very good. There are many specifics there, more than 600 pages, and for each vendor, you need to adapt, which is quite tricky, isn't it? And the next format is Common Vulnerability Reporting Framework. Okay, this format was developed by another consortium, and the major driver was Cisco, and they published vulnerabilities in this format. Then they were joined by Red Hat and Oracle and Microsoft, so they are still issuing bulletins in this format with some adaptations. So, an important thing to mention, the format wasn't mature from the start. It became more mature with version 1.1, and the major kind of task of this format is to have an even playing field for every stakeholder, be you the vendor, the user, and so on. So you can take this document and use it to your liking. Let's have a quick look at the screenshots. So this is from a big mind map. Here you can see in red some mandatory fields. So you can see some specification here. So we have the eval. We could show here remediation, but this was required. And here we have it. Here we are talking about the type of workaround or vendor fix to solve this vulnerability. It also talks about the issues related to these vulnerabilities, and this is available to all the market participants. What are the pros and cons? What can we see? The barrier to entry is much lower due to the data-driven approach when we just bring the data we need, and the other party is responsible for the visual support. So the set of mandatory attributes makes this homogeneous, and it makes it easier for all of us to deal with this. So negatives, just like with OVAL XML, we can convert it into JSON and so on, but all the vendors publish in this format, and there can be mistakes caused by conversion. And then another negative thing here is that the standard doesn't have any verifications. On one hand, this is an advantage for the vendor, but this is a disadvantage for the user. You will have to do it on your own, manually, to deal with it. And what's funny here, the consortium didn't even develop a logo. This format wasn't too spread, as we can understand. The next format is Common Security and Advisory Framework, CSAF. This format is a successor to the CVRF standard. What makes it good? Well, okay, we have JSON and so on, and it becomes a more general structure. It describes not only vulnerabilities, but also other profiles, but here we are talking about vulnerabilities. Here you can see some profiles expanded in this standard. It's called VEX and Security Advisory. Okay, what will VEX give us? So the vendor can tell you which components are vulnerable or not vulnerable, which is important for the supply chain attacks. So we are using a library, and we analyze it, and we can see that no system calls are being used, and we see that the product is not affected. This is really important for the IoT devices or for medical or storage systems, so that you don't patch the system too much. And so the consortium has a lot of players. This is another advantage, and this way we can automate our work. We have our own CMS, we have the visual editor to edit the vulnerabilities, and this reduces the barrier to entry. But this is not exactly the case. To pick all this information, the vendors will need more time so that they increase their maturity. And some other negatives here. There are not so many people using this standard. It is PR'd and promoted, and within the last 2 years at least. Now it's been used by Cisco, Microsoft, Red Hat, Oracle, but this is, well, not too much. Okay, the next one is the Russian national standard, GOST. So we have some regulations, and one of them would be the rules for describing vulnerabilities. Well, these documents are published in the stack, and then you can go and have a look. Okay, the first document, just like any national standard, it is, well, let me say, it's quite general, though it has some practical examples, which is not typical for national standards. The good thing, it has a set of attributes which are quite good for describing vulnerabilities, but there it doesn't talk about the way it should be used and how it should be automated, which is a negative. So we can see that in the stack we have regulation on the regulation, and it doesn't even refer to this document in the stack database. Okay, the results. Okay, if you've been following me closely, you might be surprised by the fact that we are comparing different formats. And why do we compare them? This is quite straightforward. We are dealing with the data provided by the vendor. So it used to be OBEL, then CVRF, then CSAF, and so on. And it doesn't really matter which format was used by the vendor to provide information on the vulnerability. What we need is just some information. We don't want to be there out in the wilderness.
Коллеги, все?
Okay.